violence of the images has us all looking toward Ukraine. Another popular revolt has been growing in Venezuela. It took the death of demonstrators to turn the world's attention there, unfortunately, to street protests and political unrest. The unrest may have an impact on President Obama's decision on the Keystone Pipeline, since Venezuela is the other potential supplier of oil to the U.S. So Canada has something at stake here, but not nearly as much, of course, as Venezuelans. So to bring us all up to speed, here are 5 questions about what's been going on and the answers.
Who's protesting?
Well, it's students to start with, thousands of them in the streets of Caracas, and they've been joined by opposition politicians. The protests went mostly unnoticed by the rest of the world until last week when 3 people were killed.
Why are they protesting?
To start, Venezuelans are frustrated by high inflation and food and medicine shortages, especially hard to stomach in a country with some of the biggest oil reserves on Earth. And they also want a voice free of government monitoring. The kind, for example, that's now blocking some protesters' pictures on Twitter.
Who's in charge?
This guy, opposition leader Leopoldo Lopez, who now sits in a military prison on charges of arson and racketeering, accusations Human Rights Watch has called politically motivated. If convicted, Lopez could spend a decade behind bars, but his arrest has only galvanized the thousands in the streets.
Who's losing control?
This guy, President Nicolas Maduro. He's been in power since Hugo Chavez died last year. He says the protests are simply a fascist plot to unseat him. And some in his government have accused the United States of orchestrating the protest movement, this week giving U.S. diplomats 48 hours to leave the country. In Mexico yesterday, Barack Obama had this to say about that.
In Venezuela, rather than trying to distract from its own failings by making up false accusations against diplomats from the United States, the government ought to focus on addressing the legitimate grievances of the Venezuelan people.
What's next?
Well, the last few days have seen an increase in street violence. Dozens have been injured, and at least 2 more demonstrators have died. How will this end? Well, that's unclear. Maduro wants to rid his country of the opposition, while Lopez has called Maduro worse than Chavez. Here, too, the people are struggling to have a say. Now, there is no independent media in Venezuela as there is in Ukraine, so the protesters have no choice but to use social media to get the world's attention. So we linked with Stephanie Fernandez and Maria Ferrandino. They're a couple of 18-year-olds living in the country's southeast, and the girls say that the protests are getting bigger and that they're concerned about their safety.
Hi, my name is Maria Fernandino from Venezuela. I am 18 years old, and we are protesting because the government corruption we are living in for the last 15 years. We barely found oil, butter, and many other products in the supermarket. We go to our schools and works, and we don't know if we are going to come back to home safe. Hi, I'm Stephanie. I'm 18 years old, and I'm protesting because we are living in a very dangerous country. We are having right now a blackout media. The national news is ignoring what is happening here in Venezuela because they are under the power of the government. The government is trying to make the whole world believe that here is nothing happening. But the truth is we are getting murdered, that we are afraid to go out of our house, and that's not possible. We are protesting, and we are Pacific people, but we want to spread to the world that here is not peace, that the government is trying to shut down what we are doing.
All right, well, our Talk Radio Heads panel is standing by now to weigh in on what they're hearing from listeners about Ukraine and all the